Hello, everyone. So today we will be discussing the city of Genoa and its progression and downfall in the Middle Ages and leading up to the Renaissance. So during the Middle Ages, Genoa was the main maritime power in the Western Mediterranean and on the western coast of Italy, and it largely controlled trade between the Italian peninsula and the rest of Western Europe. And this was while Venice, on the east coast of Italy, was the major port city controlling trade in the eastern Mediterranean. And it became a sovereign state in 1052 Common Era, which was following being brought into the Frankish Empire by Charlemagne much earlier. But despite its independence, there was much divide within the city between the aristocrats or the Podesta party and the Popular Party. And the Podesta were generally aligned with the Ghibelline and the Empire, and while the Popular Party often was aligned with the Guelph faction. So, like Venice, Genoa had a large fleet which was very well equipped to aid in the First Crusades. And so they sailed sailors to the Holy Land, and in return, Genoa was granted trading concessions and was able to gain traction in trading in the Eastern Mediterranean, in Palestine, Israel, and parts of Syria. And so, together with Pisa, Genoa succeeded in driving Muslims off the islands of Corsica and Sardinia, which are off the west coast of Italy. And in return for this, the Pope granted Genoa and Pisa joint power of these two islands. However, tensions began to rise between the two coastal cities, and it culminated in open warfare lasting from 1230 Common Era through 1241 when Genoa finally defeated Pisa.
After the Crusade, the Pope granted shared control of the islands of Corsica and Sardinia to Pisa and Genova. Moreover, Genova received recognition from the emperor. Genova achieved what was nearly impossible at the time, to have support from both the Pope and the emperor. Genova, as an extremely rich and powerful state, became not just a trade competitor to Venice, but a threat serious enough to open warfare with. Meanwhile, the joint control over Corsica and Sardinia built up the tension between Pisa and Genoa. In 2040, they turned against each other and engaged in several battles. In 1284, Genova defeated Pisa's fleet. With Pisa distracted by Florence, Venice immediately realized that Genova was the only threat to its hegemony to luxury trade. In 1257 and 58, Venice won two battles with Genoa. However, the Genoese, known as La Superba, the Proud, didn't give up. Instead, they engaged in a clever diplomacy, undid the alliance between Venice and Byzantium. Realizing Byzantium's leaders were unpopular within the empire, the Genoese created chaos. As a result, in 1298, Genova defeated the Venetians and were rewarded with trading concessions. But the Republic of Genova was not united. The classes of Genoa were divided. The Popolani party of the common people would suffer on the frontier of war, while the aristocracy would benefit from it. On the other hand, Venice as a united government that could represent everyone's interest. In 13 AD and 81, the War of Chioggia with Venice destroyed the fleet of Genova. Venice, was the final winner of the domination game and became the sea power of the Mediterranean. Genova was still an important state, but it stayed out of Venetians' interest. After the defeat, the Genoa were even more divided, not only between the class factions, but also within the factions themselves. The aristocratic families fought for political powers, and even for control over the fleet and trade, murdering and exiling each other. Eventually, Genova was controlled by France, Milan, among other external powers, but nothing could end the conflict, which was ultimately so great there's no resurgence for Genova.
So music and art in Genoa during the Renaissance was very important. Rich families would commission frescoes, which are large murals, and a lot of these were flattering to the patrons and kind of classical Greek and Roman scenes. But what we looked at actually were these frescoes that depicted musicians practicing music. And so this shows us a lot of the instruments of the time, and it's some Baroque instruments, but there's viola da gambas, and it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but there's a variety of instruments and musicians playing. And if we go to the next slide, there's more examples. And so the Spagnola family were known as lovers of the Spanish because they were in service of the Spanish throne, and they were a really wealthy family in the Republic. And so they commissioned many of these frescoes for various buildings in the city. And so here it's a little bit clearer, and you can see that musicians have lutes, a guitar, there's singers and cornetto, and kind of because of the loud instruments that are being played here, people have thought that this has been a depiction of battle music. And so there are many other examples of frescoes in churches and other buildings, but each fresco kind of depicts the function of musicians in Genoa and shows the strong ties to Spain, and sacred music and music for parties were both played and are both depicted in these frescoes. So we continue to see the impact that music and art have on the cities during this time.